Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah, dear students at Faculty of Commerce English section, first grade. Today we will continue in our section the topic of the Consumer Price Index and the GDP deflator, and we will have a quick revision about types of inflation, how we can calculate the GDP deflator, what is the difference between GDP deflator and the CPI. So first, back to the definition of the GDP deflator and the consumer price index. The GDP deflator reflects the prices of all goods produced domestically. So GDP deflator is concerned by the goods that are produced only domestically, while the CPI reflects the prices of all goods bought by consumers. As we know, the CPI or Consumer Price Index is related to consumers. Its mere concern is consumer and what goods and services consumers buy. So the CPI compares the prices of a fixed basket of goods over time, while the GDP deflator compares the prices of goods currently produced to the prices of the goods produced in base year. That's why GDP deflator formula is equal to nominal GDP divided by real GDP multiply 100. So if we have a group of goods and services that we want to use to compute the GDP deflator, it changes automatically over time as output changes. As the nominal GDP changes, the GDP deflator changes. And the consumer price index is only related to goods and services producers or consumers use. So when we want to focus more on this difference, we have to know that imported consumer goods is included in the CPI because consumers may buy an imported goods, while the GDP deflator is related to the goods and services produced domestically. This means that imported consumer goods is excluded from the GDP deflator. Second thing is capital goods. Capital goods, it's used by producers only, which means that it's excluded from the consumer price index and it's included in the GDP deflator only on one case if it's produced domestically. Last thing that the basket, this means that the consumer price index uses fixed basket, while the GDP deflator using the basket of currently produced goods and services. So this only matters if different prices are changing by different amounts. So if we wanted to correct the economic effects of inflation, we use the CPI to adjust figures. In this example, this is a person who has a salary from one year to another. We have a comparison for his salary from one year to another using this simple formula, value in year $2 equal to value in year $1 multiply price level in year 2 divided by price level in year 1. So this formula is used to change the dollar value from one year to another. So here it's a salary of one person who has a salary in 1931, which is 80,000. The CPI in 1931 was 15.2. CPI in 2001 is 177. To see that there is a huge change from 1931 to 12,000 or 2001, which is 175. This means that the salary of this person in 2001 dollars is equal to 80,000 multiply the CPI of this year divided by the CPI of the changing or of the base year, which means that this salary in 1931 is equal to 931,579 in 2001. So if we want to make a comparison of the value of this money in 2001, we use this formula. We use the value in year one dollars multiply price level in year two divided by price level in year one. Then we have a very important terminology, which is indexation. Indexation, it's automatic correction of a dollar amount for effects of inflation. So many governments use to transfer programs for the benefits in order to face inflation. So the uses of indexation in private sector, we use it in labor contracts, which include COLAs or cost of living allowance. And then we have a important comparison between the real interest rate and the nominal interest rate. Nominal interest rate is the interest rate usually reported without correction for the effects of inflation. The central bank has a nominal interest rate which can changes from some period to another. If we have a 10% interest rate, this is a nominal interest rate. If we compare this interest rate to the inflation rate, we have a real interest rate. So here, nominal interest rate, maybe we have it like 10%. If we had an inflation rate of 8%, this means that we have a real interest rate, which is 2%. So the real interest rate is equal to the nominal interest rate minus the inflation. So if we want to exclude the inflation rate from the nominal interest rate, we can obtain the real interest rate. This is a numerical example. This is a numerical example about a student who has 100 in his saving account and earning 3% interest. This is called a nominal interest rate. What he actually get, it's not a 3% interest rate because we have inflation rate, which means that here the prices rises by 3% during the year. This means that the real interest rate is equal to nominal interest rate minus the inflation rate, which is equal to 3 minus 3 equal to 0. If inflation rate or the changes in prices was 5%, this means that he has a negative real interest rate because the inflation rate is larger than the nominal interest rate. If the inflation rate was only 1%, This means the real interest rate is equal to 2%. So we have inflation and money illusion. If all prices, wages, salaries, rents, and so forth increase by the same percentage, the real effects of inflation might be minimal. If we had wages that increase like prices and salaries increase as well, rents, and so on, this means that we have a minimal effects or real effects of inflation. If Ted's salary is 10 per day and he uses to buy pizza for $6 and two mochas for $2, with inflation rate of 100% per day, all prices and salaries are doubled. This means that in the second day or next day, Ted earns $20, which is $100 or $10 plus $10. This $10 doubled because inflation rate was 100%, which means that doubling the prices in the next day, we have pizza cost for 12, we have two mochas for $4. This means that nominal salary or the actual number of dollars has increased, but his real salary, his purchasing power remains the same because the salary of Ted increased by the same percentage as goods increased. So here we have no real effects, and Ted can still purchase exactly what he did before. If the Ted salaries increases, but there is no increase in prices, here he might think he's better off. This is called the money illusion, and it can lead to excessive spending. So in this example, we have three cases. Maybe Ted's salary increases, but less than the percentage change in prices, which means Ted feel wealthier. If Ted increase in salary was less than the increasement in prices, this means that Ted purchasing power get less. If Ted increase in salary was equal to increase in all prices, this means that Ted has the same purchasing power, so he's still in the same situation. Here we have some countries which faced a highest inflation rate. Here we have Zimbabwe, which had 11 million% per year of 2008. And we got hyperinflation in Germany, which led the people to use something else, not the money. They used eggs as medium of exchange. So we here discuss the first type of inflation, which is an important type. It's called to cost push inflation. This inflation is caused by significant increase in the prices of input with economy-wide importance. At cost push inflation, we had higher prices of factors of production, which lead to less production, which lead to shift to the left for the short-run aggregate supply. Here we had a shift to the left for the short-run aggregate supply from this situation to this situation, which we have an increasement in prices, and also we had a decrease in amounts. Here we had a decrease in amounts. Here we had an increase in prices. Here we had a shift to the left for the short-run aggregate supply. And we have an important example for this case. It's the oil crisis which led the aggregate supply curve to shift to the left because the price level increases. An oil crisis, which lead to increasing energy prices in the United States, this caused a leftward shift of the aggregate supply curve, which increased the price level. So inflation is caused by a significant increase in the price of input with economy-wide importance. This have an very important input, which is the oil. Second type of inflation is demand pull inflation. This increased or caused by an increase in aggregate demand. Here we have increasement in aggregate demand, and we have an aggregate supply curve which tend to have zero slope, and this means that too much money chasing too few goods. So if we have too much money chasing too few goods, we have the demand pull inflation. So, and because of the two types of inflation, we have an output gap, employment rate. So the percentage difference between the actual level of real GDP and potential output, it's called output gap. When the actual aggregate output is equal to potential output, this means the actual unemployment rate is equal to the natural rate of unemployment. And in this case, we have equilibrium, we have no problem. When output gap is positive, which means we have inflationary gap, which means that the unemployment rate is below the natural rate. When the output gap is negative and recessionary gap, the unemployment rate is above the natural rate. So the difference between the actual level of real GDP and potential output, it's called output gap. When actual is equal to potential, we have an actual unemployment rate equal to natural rate of unemployment. We have zero gap. If we had a positive output gap, this means that inflationary gap, this means that the actual GDP or actual aggregate output is larger than the potential, which means that we have unemployment rate below the natural rate أقل من المستوى الطبيعي. When the output gap is negative, this means a recessionary gap. This means the unemployment rate is above the natural rate. In the long run, we have inflation and unemployment rate unrelated because inflation in main type depends mainly on gross and money supply, and we have an unemployment or natural rate depends on minimum wage, الحد الأدنى للأجور, market power of unions, efficiency wages, and the process of job search. These factors that determine the unemployment, and this is the most important factor which depends or causes the inflation. But in short run, we have a trade-off between inflation and unemployment. So we go to questions for this part. First, Oken's law. Oken's law is an important law which has a relationship between the output and unemployment. So first measures the trade-off between the rate of inflation and the rate of unemployment. And this is not true because it determines the relationship between the unemployment rate and the size of the negative GDP gap. Oken's law states that an increasement in the unemployment rate by 1% will lead to a negative GDP gap from 2 to 3%. Second question is, for every 1 percentage point that the actual unemployment rate exceeded the natural rate, a 2 percentage point negative GDP gap output occurs. This is a statement of first, Taylor's rule, second, Oken's law, C, Say's law, the causes theory. So the right answer is Oken's law. Inflation means that all prices are rising but at different rates. All prices are rising at the same rate. Prices in the aggregate are rising, although some particular prices may be falling. Real income are rising. The right answer here is C, because prices in aggregate are rising. Some goods uh, depends on its elasticity, depends on the consumer, may have its prices falling. Question 4. The consumer price index was 177 in 2001 and 179 in 2002. The consumer price index was 177.1 in 2001 and 179.9 in 2002. So the rate of inflation in 2002 was about. In order to calculate the CPI from one year to another, we take the second year value CPI 2002, which is 179.9 minus the past year or previous year CPI, which was 177.1, and we divide them or this value by 177.1. Then we multiply the total by 100 in order to obtain the percentage change to get the rate of inflation. So the result will be 1.6%. The rate of inflation can be found by subtracting the real income from the nominal income, last year price index from this year's price index, this year's price index from last year's price index, and dividing the difference by the year's price index, last year price index from this year price index, and dividing them by the difference by last year's price index. This is a true answer. This is how we can calculate the inflation rate by subtracting the CPI of last year from this year. So CPI 2 minus CPI 1 divided by CPI 1. Demand pull inflation occurs when prices of resources rise, pushing up costs, and the price level occurs when total spending exceeded the economy's ability to provide output at the existing price. Occurs only when the economy has reached its absolute production capacity. Is also called push inflation. Demand pull inflation depends on the demand side of the equation, which means that it occurs when total spending exceeded the economy's ability to provide output at existing price level. So right answer here is B. Too much money chasing too few goods. And this is statement for the demand pull inflation. Question 8. Inflation initiated by increase in wages or other resource prices is labeled demand pull inflation, cost push inflation, demand push inflation, or cost pull inflation. Reminder, focus that it's demand pull inflation and cost push inflation. This is the two types that we take in this section. So here, because wages is a factor of production, this means that it's cost push inflation. Cost push inflation may be caused by a decline in per unit production costs, a decrease in wage rates, a negative supply shock, an increase in resource availability. Cost push inflation, it's for the supply side, and it's a negative supply shock. Real income is found by dividing nominal income by 70, multiplying nominal income by 1.03, dividing the price index in hundreds by nominal GDP, or dividing nominal income by the price index. Real income, it's about nominal income divided by the price level or price index in hundreds. So the right answer is D. Thank you for listening and see you in next section.